Good evening, bro.
Hey,
How you doing?
good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Had a
Good.
pretty good day so far.
Good.
Yeah, had 10 boneless wings from
That
B-Dubs and
helps. That
fries.
helps.
Man,
Rubbing it in. I missed lunch.
oh, and you gave blood today.
I did. Do I look lighter? Do I look thinner? I thought I'd try
I'm
something.
gonna try yours. Yes.
There we
Is
go.
that
Yeah. Yep.
You're not feeling
Yep.
lightheaded or anything?
No,
Okay.
no. Although I told Ben, the girl that drew my blood or was unhooking everything, had just gone through a weird situation. Like somebody had an allergic reaction and was kind of responding, and they were thrown in. You could tell she was thrown for a loop.
Mhm.
So she pulls my needle, and she's holding it there, and she wraps it, and then she's giving me the instructions. And when she finishes, she goes and smacked my arm just kind of playfully as she was talking, and she was new. And all the other like ladies that draw blood like freaked out and came up to me and was like, "We're there. She shouldn't have hit you," and it's I didn't even feel it. It's like a wrap. It's fine.
Yeah.
So
Well, thank you for giving blood, man.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's the only A positive I ever get, A plus I ever get. Kevin McKenzie says he didn't pass a single test, and I was thinking, come on, Kevin, you drive. You're either driving illegally or you lied, right? But then my blood type is A positive, so it's the one A plus I get in my life. So I can say that.
Nice.
So, yeah, there you go.
We only have 3 verses now.
That's it.
Three short
Yep.
verses.
Yep.
1 Corinthians chapter 13. What was the title of your sermon?
It has something to do with tennis. I don't remember because love in tennis means nothing. And yet Paul was saying, if I have not love, I have nothing. So it was something like, unlike in tennis, without love, we are nothing, or something like that. You have to check YouTube. I don't remember the title.
You are human.
Yeah, I don't remember the
Thank
title.
you, Lord. He's you. I thought you were a human computer.
Oh no. Well, that was probably in the blood that got sucked out. That's what.
Okay, so next week you'll be 100%.
Yes, there you go.
All right. Well, man, first of all, sermon was great. Thank you for that, man. It really hit me hard. Convicted me in many areas. Go ahead.
No, I'm excited about the next couple of weeks because I think we're largely reactive people as human beings, right? Like something happens, we react, and then we overreact. So I think of it like driving on the snow. We're tempted to just drift both ways. So I think some of the conversation goes to, I've heard theologians say, First John says God is love. And our society has almost switched that to love is God.
Yeah.
So we're saying, wow, just love is love, the Beatles, love is all you need.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just how we're going to live. And so it's tempting for some of us to swerve back the other way,
right,
and really kind of undermine or undervalue love. Especially, and we didn't necessarily hit this in the sermon, I guess it's the cutting room floor thing even already, as if truth and love fight each other. Right.
I think what you're saying is there's a misconception that to tolerate my sin, like if you love me, that means you'll tolerate all of me, which is tolerating even the things that go against God. Is that that's
right? So I think that's and so with that tolerance, meaning you'll actually endorse, you'll actually support, you'll actually be there for it. So then the counter response is almost swerve the other way. That is like, no, if you're doing things that are sinful, I'm not going to love you. I'm going to God hates the sin, and I'm going to hate the sinner.
Right,
I'm going to bring them both as a counter spin. And it's like, no, wait a minute. We are called to love. We're going to define love next week more clearly through the terms that it lays out. But I think it's, for 2,000 years, it's been a poignant subject and relevant. But yeah, I'm excited about last week and the next 2 weeks as well.
Well, help me out real quick. So you mentioned 2 extremes. And so where should we be? Give me like a scenario. I'm thinking something in my head, but we encounter someone.
Yeah. I think some of the examples what I brought up on the side, and it was interesting. This was a while ago, but and then it seems to dust up every once in a while, like Tim Keller comes up. And for those of us who are kind of in the reformist tribe, who care about church planting, Tim Keller's a pretty significant source. His podcast that they had that was through Westminster Seminary that was called, I think, Preaching in a Postmodern World, was just incredible. and walking through that and what preaching looks like and the goal of preaching. And honestly, he and Ed Clowney were starting like in Genesis and working their way through. And man, sometimes they preached.
Yeah.
And I just remember going, oh, I never saw that in the text. I didn't see how that connected to Jesus. I mean, beautiful stuff.
Ed is a great storyteller.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's been interesting to watch Keller get a lot of heat from people kind of in this cycled through. And I brought it up in the sermon of like, he's kind of taken a back seat the last couple of years. He pastored in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
He's now retired.
Okay.
And he's been fighting pancreatic cancer for the last 3-4 years. And I think that's one of the things, like, because he kind of gets a bullseye on him, and people want to claim he's liberal, want to claim he's tolerant of all of these other things, want to claim he's woke or whatever term you want to use. I remember sitting with somebody one day here at the church, and they were talking, and Keller's name came up for some reason, and they just said, "Oh, isn't it sad?" And I thought they were going to talk about the cancer.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, it is." And they said, "Yeah, I mean, he's just completely gone off the wrong direction." I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Oh, from what I've heard, I said, "I haven't heard anything from him lately. Where's he gone off the rails or whatever?" And they said, "Oh, from what I've heard, he's speaking at conferences he shouldn't be, and he's starting to endorse things, and he's just really gone liberal." Like they just saw he's gone all the way over to this other side. And I remember looking at the person and saying, after they kind of shared this, and they didn't know of any of it, they just knew of it from other people. Right. I said, "Well, that's surprising to me, because I was under the impression he'd shut down his public ministry while he's fighting pancreatic cancer, which is what had happened." And the person just kind of looked at me and was like, "Huh." And I think it hit me in two ways there. It's like, one, I'm not saying he's perfect.
Yeah.
We don't line up with things about some of his pastoral philosophy. He's all about reaching the big cities because that's where the people are.
Right.
We don't do that here in Greenville as much.
And not only the big city, but that particular place where there's lots of things.
Right. And so he's Presbyterian, which we don't agree with that full covenantal structure and baptism of babies and stuff like that. So we would look at that and say, okay, we come from a little bit of a different strand there. Some of his philosophy of ministry is a little bit different. They would engage non-believers in elements of ministry, hoping that would be a process of like drawing them in, which
I didn't know that.
Which we don't do that. Yeah. So there's things we would definitely say, man, we do things differently. But the biggest stuff he came under heat for is he's kind of known as talking about the third way. And so you've got legalism on one side. You've got lawlessness on the other side. So he looks at the prodigal son story, and as a lot of guys do, and says, look at the older brother's the legalist. I did everything you wanted. You never even gave me a goat. The younger brother's the lawless one. Give me my money so I can go out and do my thing. And he says, Jesus isn't teaching you balance between those two. He's not teaching you choose one over the other. He's teaching a third way. He's teaching a different approach altogether that is the gospel.
Okay.
And so he gets rid of this conversations that become divisive, and a lot of times either left or right, black or white, whatever it is, where we just make it, a binary equation.
Yeah.
He looks and goes, no. Maybe it's neither.
Okay.
And the gospel calls us to a different life,
Amen.
A different way. I think it's beautiful. And I think it is winsome. And so when he's engaging somebody about homosexuality, he's I don't know how many times he's made it clear that he holds to a biblical sexual ethic, but he's not interested in like turn or burn. Like, I don't want to have a relationship with you. I'm writing you off. You just, this like, I got off my chest. You need to repent, but I may have done it in a way where you never will. But, he's looking at him and going, how can I show you this is a better way? How can I demonstrate from my life that I've had to submit my sexual desires to what God's rule is? And it's a better way. I've seen fruit for it.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that was one side of it, is like, I think the reason why he gets under such attack is because he's trying to proclaim truth, but not do it in an unloving way. And then to watch the way some Christians respond to that, where there's no concern about whether what they're saying is accurate about a fellow brother, things like that. It's like, no, see, we're lacking love in the way we even interact and disagree with other people.
Yeah.
And so I think it just, because I think the culture we're living in right now is all about winning.
Mm-hmm.
It's ironic. I mean, we live amongst Browns fans and Bengals fans, and yet somehow we're all obsessed with winning, even though neither one does it. I got to get that jab in. After last night, one team still won 6 Super Bowls, and another team has neither Ohio team has ever won one. So, but yeah, like I think that's, and I guess that's the interesting part is like thinking about Corinth. It's no different. Like I don't think we're in a different culture today. You take chapter 12, what we were talking about, the temptation to like, ooh, I want to hear from the prophet, or ooh, I want to hear from one of the original apostles, or ooh, I want to hear from Apollos. And well, I will eat meat sacrificed to idols. Well, I have this spiritual gift. Well, and there's just this constant one-upping and sizing up and even approach to gathering with the body of Christ in such a way for what am I going to get out of it?
Yeah.
Instead of from a perspective of what are we going to give to each other.
Yeah. And I think you're going to press into that next week where you'll explain the Greek definition of agape. What that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm going to go a completely different direction.
Okay.
With the remaining of our time.
Yep.
And this is secondary to the point that Paul's making. But I'm looking at like certain phrases like tongues of angels.
Mm-hmm.
Tongues of angels. You may have talked about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole faith, like to move mountains. And so as I'm like reading over that this morning in my devotionals, the first thing that came into my head is like, oh, the First Corinthian church is the name it and claim it prosperity gospel church. Because, and help me here, this is you helping me. We know that during the time of Pentecost, there were tongues, but they were languages, they were spoken languages of men and women of different nations, right? And so when they proclaimed the word of God, they were understood by people walking in the streets who understood that particular language. Like, wow, how's this Jewish dude talking Spanish right now? So that could only be a move of the Lord. But tongues of angels.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's weird.
Yeah.
And then like the faith to move mountains. Like I've heard that a lot. Like if you could do this, that, and the other, A, B, and C. And if you just have the faith, you can. So is that what the Corinthian church is dealing with too? Like were they all in on this like faith movement type of thing? It seems like it.
I think it can be. Yeah. I think,
but because it seems like I wonder if Paul's being facetious here.
I think he's using hyperbole. And I think that's the hard thing. Like I know you finish the music, you got to use a restroom and stuff like that. People grab you in the narthex and you don't get back into the room right away. Because I did kind of hit that a little bit in the sermon of like, I think it's hypotheticals. First of all, it's subjective. He's saying if I with each of these. I also think it's not just hypothetical, but it's also hyperbole that he's saying, because when he says even, he doesn't just say, if I speak in the tongues of some men, or if I speak in some of the tongues of men. It's like, if I speak in the tongues of men, it's almost like name a language, Farsi, Russian, Spanish, whatever. And boy, Paul could do it. Right. And then even of angels, that it's like, it's not necessarily an affirmation that people were speaking in the tongues of angels by saying that, but almost like all of men, and hey, I'll throw in heaven too. Like maybe and speak the angelic dialect. Now, I will say, I don't think it refutes and means that doesn't happen. Okay. But I think it doesn't necessarily mean it's affirming like that was taking place. Okay. With the faith to move mountains, I think that's a great one. Jesus said that twice. He mentions if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move, and it would move for you. He's saying that I think it gets to and this is why I would say, there's probably a little bit of prosperity movement, because there's a little bit of prosperity movement in all of us, right? There's a little bit of thinking in all of us of like, man, finances are tight. Maybe if we just give a little bit more and we do our devotions and we live right, finances could open up. Boy, I got a scary health diagnosis from the doctor. Maybe if I just pray a little bit more, if I get involved in a Bible study, then maybe God will see that and he'll bless and honor, right? We're tempted to do those things. I I think the mindset of if you have faith, you can move a mountain. You think about if you had that ability, that becomes a real. Some of the superhero movies will do this. I mean, one of them's not coming to mind right now, but like the idea of like you suddenly discover you have this incredible power. Now, what are you gonna do with it? You're gonna help society and save humanity,
Okay.
or you're gonna just live for self because now you're invisible. You can go into the convenience store, take whatever you want, and leave. You know,
Okay.
like are you gonna do those things? So, what are you gonna do with your faith that could move mountains? And is it, hey, look at me, I'm the man of faith. Look what I can accomplish. Look what I can pull off. Or is it going to be, Lord, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you to want to work in us. I'm trusting you to want to further the gospel in our community, that I think those moments hit. Like, what's the appeal of the prosperity gospel? It's for God to work, which we should all desire, but it's for God to work to my gain. Even if maybe it's not to the gain of others, even if maybe it's not to the gain of the kingdom.
Yeah.
Whereas we're called to flip it
Yeah.
and go, okay, now, God, we want you to work for your kingdom and for the good of others, which will be my good.
Yeah.
Even if some of the other things I'd like to come along too. Yeah. So that's kind of where we hit too, of like taking a little bit different perspective than he did in the way he said it when he says, but have not love. I think I'm reading more into that there of it's not out of a lack of love. I mentioned that a couple of times in the sermon. The contrast is not do you love or do you have a lack of love? It's where is your love placed? And I think when Paul's saying, but have not love, he's really saying have not love for God and for others. Because I don't have any problem loving me. I gotta turn that love away from being about me to being about God and others.
Ooh, I love it, man. I love it. Thank you for unpacking that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of folks can look at that and say, oh, so there are tons of men or tons of angels, and there very well could be, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Anything else?
No, it's a short week, man.
All right.
Easy week.
All right.
So we'll jump in next week. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm hoping we can cover a lot of the territory, but I want to, if it preps it for people. If you hear this before you go to life group, I don't even remember if the life group questions go there. I think Jesus talks about it talks about the law of Christ. Paul talks about that a lot. 1 John, where Ben is, talks about a new commandment I give you, and then he says, but not a new commandment, but an old commandment. I think we're going to walk through the next section in 1 Corinthians 13. This will be the preview in the same way that we walked through Exodus 20 as a church.
Okay.
When we had the 10 commandments.
Was I here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I can tell it changed your life. You're always keeping me humble.
Well, on that note.
Wait. Let me see if any of it stuck. How many commandments are there?
Are you serious?
I'm just checking.
10?
All right. Actually, Jesus said 2. Love God, love it. No, I set you up. No matter what you said, I was going to go the other direction. 5. Thank you for this, man. Yeah. Look forward to next week. All right. Hey, it's gone stale on questions. We assume, we were talking, I think it's just because the music is so well set up, the sermons, and the sermons have been so clear. Nobody's had any questions, but hey, if one comes up, feel free to text us 937-404-1207. Maybe we'll get more when we get into chapter 14.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. We're out of here. Remember, Christ has done all the work, so
we're just driving home.
Peace.